As I near 30, the memories of my youth haunt me, blurring the line between nostalgia and regret. I watch from a distance as the friends I once considered family slip further away, scattered across broken paths I never anticipated. There's Derek, who once lit up our school with his jokes and dreams of YouTube fame, now erased from the digital world, as if he'd never existed, his heart shattered by the only girl he'd ever loved. Then there's Lisa, who sang with a voice that made you believe in angels, now lost in lay, her days spent tangled in a world of substances that promise her escape but steal her soul in return. Even Tyler, who could have been anything, is trapped in a cycle, still under his father's roof, his dreams wilting under the weight of expired permits and forgotten promises. And me? I'm here, watching them drift like fragments of a forgotten life, feeling the ache of what we once were and the guilt of what I've managed to become. Sometimes, I wonder if my happiness was a betrayal, an unspoken acknowledgement of the roles we've been assigned in a world where few of us have won. It's strange, knowing you've held onto something they've lost. It's stranger still, knowing that while you stand on solid ground, they're slowly sinking, and there's nothing you can do to pull them up. I can't shake the feeling that life is pulling me forward while they're all stuck, sinking deeper into their struggles. The guilt gnaws at me, even as I try to remind myself that I didn't do anything wrong. If anything, I did what we were all supposed to do, worked hard, took a few risks, and managed to land on my feet. But sometimes I feel like my success comes at a cost. And maybe that's what makes it so hard to be around them now, even in passing. Derek used to make me laugh like nobody else could, but he's gone now, disappeared into a silence that echoes through our shared past. Lisa's beautiful voice, once so full of hope and possibility, is now a faint memory, drowned out by choices she can't seem to escape. And Tyler? He's become a cautionary tale of what happens when you never let go of the comfort that holds you back. There's a part of me that wishes I could reach back, grab them by the hand, and pull them into the life I've built. But how do you save someone who's already resigned to their fate? And how do you reconcile the feeling of moving on when so much of what you once cherished has crumbled around you? It's in these moments when I'm most haunted by the past that I meet her, a woman whose presence feels like a reminder that life, no matter how fractured, still holds room for new connections. She's a stranger, yet she understands me in ways I can't explain, her history woven with threads of loss and resilience. And in her eyes, I find a glimmer of hope. A chance to confront the guilt I've carried and maybe, just maybe, make peace with it. Her name is Emily. I met her on one of those restless nights when memories weighed heavy on my mind, and sleep felt like a distant luxury. I found myself in a quiet cafe, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold when she walked in. She had a presence that seemed to shift the air, like she carried the kind of story that could fill the silence between us. We exchanged a glance. A simple meeting of eyes that stretched into a silent conversation. I didn't know what brought her there, but something about her felt familiar, as though she understood the heaviness of carrying a past that doesn't let go. It didn't take long before we were talking, sharing pieces of our lives over the fading hum of the cafe. She spoke with a sincerity that made me forget, for a moment, the weight of my own guilt. Emily had her ghosts, stories of friends she'd lost touch with, of dreams she'd let slip through her fingers. But she wore her scars with a kind of grace that I envied. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady, as if she had accepted the broken pieces of her life and learned to live with them, rather than wishing for something else. As the night wore on, I found myself sharing my own story, the fragments of friends who were once my world, now scattered like ash. I told her about Derek, Lisa, Tyler, all the people I couldn't save, all the dreams that faded while I found my footing. And she listened, her gaze never wavering, as though she could see right into the heart of everything I hadn't said. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. The possibility of connection, of moving forward without the constant ache of the past pulling me back. Emily made me feel like I could breathe again. Even as I confessed the things that haunted me, she spoke of resilience, of how we can carry both love and loss without letting either define us completely. And in those quiet hours, I realized that maybe it wasn't about letting go of the past, but rather learning to hold it gently, without letting it suffocate the present. She leaned closer, her hand brushing mine, and in that touch, I felt a spark of hope. A reminder that life could still hold new beginnings, even amidst the ruins of what once was. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I became inseparable. We shared long walks under streetlights, late-night conversations that dissolved the hours, and moments of quiet understanding that felt as natural as breathing. With her, I could see a future that didn't feel weighed down by the memories I carried. She taught me how to find beauty in the present, in the here and now, and slowly, I felt the grip of my past beginning to loosen. But just as I started to believe I could move forward, the past came knocking, forcing me to confront everything I'd tried to leave behind. One evening, as we were walking along the old pier, I received a message from Tyler. He hadn't reached out in years, but his words were familiar, filled with the same desperation that had always lingered between us. He was in trouble, lost, broken, and reaching out because he had nowhere else to turn. My instinct was to ignore it, to keep walking beside Emily and pretend that the past could stay in the past. But the guilt weighed too heavily, like a shadow that I could no longer ignore. Emily noticed my silence, the shift in my mood, and stopped, looking up at me with that steady gaze I had come to cherish. I told her everything about Tyler's message, about the memories that haunted me, and the fear of what facing him might mean. She listened patiently, then placed her hand on mine, her touch grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. "You can't save everyone," she whispered, "but you can choose to be there for those who need you when you're able." She reminded me that healing isn't about shouldering every burden alone, but about letting others in, allowing them to help carry the weight when it becomes too much. At that moment, I knew I had to go to Tyler to face whatever ghosts still lingered between us. The next day, I found myself standing on the porch of Tyler's family home, a place I hadn't visited in years. He opened the door, and I was struck by how much he had changed. The vibrant, reckless boy I once knew had faded, leaving behind someone barely recognizable. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. But when he saw me, a flicker of the old Tyler sparked in his expression. We sat in silence, the years of distance stretching between us, until finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. He told me about the mistakes, the regrets, and the cycles he couldn't seem to break. He spoke of dreams that had turned to dust and a life that felt too heavy to bear. As I listened, I realized that I wasn't there to fix him, to offer solutions, or to make promises I couldn't keep. I was there to remind him that he wasn't alone, that even after all these years, someone still cared. I couldn't erase the past or change the choices he had made, but in that moment, I could give him what he needed most: understanding, compassion, and the reminder that the bonds we once shared still held a place in my heart. When I returned to Emily later that evening, she embraced me, her warmth a soothing balm to the turmoil that lingered from my visit. And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. I realized that maybe this was the purpose of love, of connection, not to erase the past, but to help each other carry it, to make the weight a little lighter. As we stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I understood that I could hold both the love I had for Emily and the memories of those I'd lost without letting either consume me. And in that balance, I found the strength to look forward to a future where the past could live alongside the present, each a part of the tapestry that had shaped who I was becoming. In the days that followed my visit with Tyler, I felt a shift within me, as though I had finally unlocked a door I'd kept closed for far too long. With Emily by my side, I began reaching out to the people who had once meant everything to me, those whose lives had diverged so drastically from my own. One by one, I made contact, small, tentative steps toward the parts of my past I had avoided for years. My next visit was to Derek, the friend who had vanished from social media, leaving behind a digital ghost town of memories. I found him at a rundown coffee shop, looking worn and defeated, his face a shadow of the person I once knew. His smile was faint when he saw me, and for a moment, I wondered if coming here had been a mistake. But then, as we sat down, I could see a glimmer of the old direct beneath the surface, a spark that reminded me of the countless nights we'd spent laughing, dreaming of all we'd become. We spoke about his decision to walk away from his online presence and the heartbreak that had left him feeling hollow. He told me about how it had all become too much, the expectations, the constant pressure to perform, and the betrayal that had shattered his trust. I didn't try to give him advice or offer solutions. Instead, I simply listened, letting him know that his pain was real and that he had a right to feel what he felt. As we sat there, he confessed that he had been thinking of starting over, of finding a way back to the things he once loved. For the first time, he seemed open to the possibility of healing, and I realized that sometimes all a person needs is a reminder that they're not alone. My next visit was to Lisa. I tracked her down through a mutual friend and found her living in a small apartment on the edge of the city. She was different from the girl who once sang with such passion, her voice now tinged with a sadness that spoke of dreams deferred. She had been through a lot, her voice almost gone, her spirit battered, but she hadn't completely lost hope. As I spoke to her, I could see flashes of resilience, fragments of the fierce girl I remembered. We spent the afternoon reminiscing about the old days, laughing at memories that had once felt larger than life. By the time I left, she had promised to try singing again, even if only for herself, and I could see a spark reigniting in her eyes, a reminder of what she had once been and could be again. Each encounter brought with it a mix of joy and sorrow, a reminder of the lives we had once shared and the paths that had taken us so far apart. Through it all, Emily was there, her presence a constant comfort, her words a gentle reminder that healing is a journey, not a destination. She helped me see that reaching out to my old friends wasn't just about them. It was about me, about finding peace with the parts of myself I had buried along with those friendships. In the end, it was Tyler who reached out to me, asking if we could all meet one last time. It was his idea to gather the remnants of our old group, to share a night that reminded us of what we once had. We met at the beach, the same place where so many of our memories had been made, and for a few hours, it felt like no time had passed at all. We laughed, shared stories, and let the waves wash away the weight of all we carried alone. As the night drew to a close, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. Standing there with Emily beside me, surrounded by the friends who had shaped my life, I understood that while we had all changed, we were still connected, still bound by the shared history that had brought us together. I didn't know what the future held for any of us, but in that moment, I felt a deep, abiding peace, a sense that no matter where we went, we carry pieces of each other with us. And as I looked out at the stars, I knew that this was enough. We had made it through the darkness, each of us in our way, and found a light that would guide us forward. After that night on the beach, something inside me shifted. I realized that life wasn't about holding on or letting go, but about learning to carry the memories with grace. Each of my friends have found their own way to cope, to survive, to move forward. They were still wrestling with their struggles, but they had each taken small steps towards something new, something that felt like hope. With Emily, I began to envision a life that felt both grounded and free. She showed me the power of acceptance, of learning to embrace the parts of ourselves that are scared and broken, while also reaching for something beautiful. Together, we carved out moments that felt timeless. A quiet afternoon in the park, laughter shared over a cup of coffee, and the warmth of her hand in mine as we wandered through the city at dusk. In those small, fleeting moments, I found the peace I had been searching for, a sense of purpose that went beyond my past. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I told her about the reunion with my friends. I shared the details of our night on the beach, of the laughter, the shared stories, and the unspoken understanding that connected us all. Emily listened with that familiar steady gaze, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She understood, perhaps better than anyone else, the journey I had been on, the weight of guilt, the release of acceptance, the bittersweet beauty of closure. In the months that followed, I stayed in touch with my old friends, each of us finding our rhythm in the chaos of life. Derek began sharing his story through writing, chronicling the highs and lows of his past in a way that felt both cathartic and inspiring. Lisa returned to music, but this time for herself, her voice a little softer, but filled with a depth that only came from experience. Tyler, who had once been stuck in a loop, leaped, moving to a new city to start fresh, finding a job, and slowly building a life he could call his own. As for me, I learned to let go of the need to save everyone and instead found joy in simply being there, offering support without trying to fix what wasn't mine to mend. I found solace in the present, in the love I shared with Emily, in the memories of the past that had shaped me, and in the future that lay ahead. One day, Emily and I stood by the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, a reminder of the cycles of time, of the way life ebbs and flows. She took my hand, and we stood there in silence, a profound peace settling over us. In that moment, I knew that I had come full circle, that I had made peace with the past and embraced the life I was living now. As we walked along the sand, I felt a quiet joy, a sense that, at last, I was exactly where I was meant to be, with Emily by my side and the memories of those I had loved and lost woven into the fabric of my soul. I looked forward to the journey ahead. The future stretched out before us, vast and open, filled with possibilities. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready.